Jasmine Washington stared at the board meeting agenda, acquisition of National Airlines, final vote. 24 hours ago, she'd been humiliated, forced from first class to economy because passengers felt uncomfortable. Now, as CEO of America's largest investment firm, their fate rested in her hands. Revenge would be served at 30,000 feet. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice and transformation, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how Jasmine turns the tables on those who underestimated her. Let's see if corporate America is ready for what happens when you discriminate against the wrong passenger. Jasmine Washington wasn't just any business traveler. At 42, she was the brilliant CEO of Pinnacle Capital, a powerhouse investment firm with $75 billion under management. Her reputation on Wall Street was legendary. Tough but fair, with an uncanny ability to spot opportunities others missed. Today's journey from Atlanta to San Francisco wasn't for pleasure, she was heading to a critical meeting with tech investors that could reshape the digital banking industry. When Jasmine approached the first-class boarding lane at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from 2 decades of breaking barriers. Her custom Navy Armani suit cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments, and her briefcase contained deal proposals worth billions. Yet the moment she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, something shifted in the atmosphere. "Welcome to National Airlines, Ms. Washington," the agent said, scrutinizing her first-class ticket with unusual intensity. Once aboard Flight 237, Jasmine settled into Seat 2A and began reviewing her presentation notes. The cabin was half empty, typical for a Tuesday morning business flight. She'd just accepted a glass of pre-departure orange juice when flight attendant Brenda Stevens appeared beside her with a tight-lipped smile. "Excuse me, I need to verify your boarding pass again," Brenda said, her voice carrying across the cabin. Jasmine handed over her ticket, maintaining her professional composure despite the obvious slight. She'd experienced this type of treatment before, the assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly belong in first class unless there was some mistake. "Is there a problem?" Jasmine asked calmly. Before Brenda could respond, a voice from across the aisle interrupted. "There certainly is." Raymond Phillips, a white banking executive in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch, was glaring at Jasmine with undisguised contempt. "I paid for first class because I expected a certain level of professionalism," Raymond said, his gaze moving deliberately from Jasmine to Brenda. "Some of us have important meetings today." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Brenda nodded sympathetically at Raymond before turning back to Jasmine. "Ma'am, there seems to be some confusion with your ticket. I need to speak with the captain." "There's no confusion," Jasmine replied, keeping her voice steady while pointing to her clearly marked seat assignment. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Minutes later, pilot Kevin Barrett emerged from the cockpit, his captain's hat tucked under his arm. Without even looking at Jasmine's boarding pass, he sided with Raymond. "We need to resolve this before takeoff," Kevin announced, as though Jasmine were causing a disruption rather than quietly sitting in her assigned seat. The situation escalated when Flight Supervisor Maxwell Peterson arrived. A balding man with a permanent scowl, he barely glanced at Jasmine's ticket before making his decision. "Ms. Washington, we can move you to economy, or you can take another flight," he stated flatly. "On what grounds?" Jasmine asked, maintaining her composure while discreetly beginning to record the interaction on her phone. "My ticket is valid, and this is my assigned seat." Maxwell leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We have the right to reassign seats for operational reasons, and several passengers have expressed concerns." The only passenger who had expressed anything was Raymond Phillips, whose smug expression made it clear he was enjoying the spectacle. Jasmine calculated her options quickly. Missing this investor meeting would cost her company millions. With internal rage but external calm, she gathered her belongings. "I'll take the economy seat, but I want your names and employee numbers," she said. "And I expect a full refund for the price difference." As Jasmine was escorted past first-class passengers to her cramped economy seat, the humiliation burned through her professional armor. Several passengers averted their eyes uncomfortably, while others stared with curiosity or pity. Raymond Phillips didn't bother hiding his satisfied smirk. In economy, Jasmine found herself wedged into a middle seat in row 28, her knees pressed against the seat in front. The $3,500 suit she wore, designed for commanding boardrooms, not surviving cattle class, would be hopelessly wrinkled by landing. The passenger beside her, Terrence Williams, a black law professor in his late 30s, had witnessed her removal from first class. "That was completely unacceptable," he whispered once she was settled. "You should sue them." "I have something better in mind," Jasmine replied. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine closed her eyes, unwanted memories surfacing from her childhood in rural Georgia. The separate water fountains might be gone, but the prejudice remained, just wearing different clothes. She remembered her grandmother's words. "They can put you in a smaller room, but they can't make your mind smaller." Jasmine's journey to becoming one of the most powerful executives in America hadn't been easy. As the only black woman in her Harvard Business School class, she'd worked twice as hard for half the recognition. On Wall Street, she'd sacrificed personal relationships to prove herself in an environment that viewed her as an anomaly. Now, despite controlling billions in capital and employing thousands, she was still just a black woman who made white passengers uncomfortable. The physical discomfort of the 5-hour flight in economy, the limited legroom, the crying baby 2 rows back, the perpetual bumping of the drink cart, was nothing compared to the emotional trauma. Every time Brenda passed by without making eye contact, the humiliation deepened. Only one flight attendant, Kyle Thompson, a young man barely out of college, showed any decency, slipping her extra snacks and water with apologetic glances. "I'm really sorry about what happened," he whispered during a quiet moment. "It wasn't right." For the remainder of the flight, Jasmine alternated between preparing for her investor meeting and contemplating how national airlines would be held accountable. By the time the plane touched down in San Francisco, her initial shock had hardened into determination. This wouldn't be just another incident to swallow and move past. This time, she had the resources and power to demand real change. Jasmine emerged from San Francisco International Airport disheveled and sleep-deprived. The cramped economy seat had left her back aching, and the emotional toll of the humiliation had prevented any meaningful rest during the flight. She headed straight to the nearest airport bathroom, carrying her designer overnight bag that contained a backup outfit, a habit formed from years of business travel. Standing before the mirror in the empty bathroom, Jasmine assessed her reflection. Her usually impeccable appearance was compromised, her suit wrinkled, her eyes revealing the strain of the past hours. She splashed cold water on her face and gave herself a quiet pep talk. "They can take your seat, but they can't take your power," she whispered to her reflection. "Focus on the meeting first. Justice comes later." After changing into her fresh outfit, a sharp charcoal skirt suit with a burgundy silk blouse, Jasmine headed to the pickup zone where her prearranged Uber waited. The driver, André Beaumont, a middle-aged Haitian immigrant with a friendly smile, greeted her warmly. "To Sequoia Ventures in Menlo Park, please," she instructed, settling into the back seat. During the 40-minute drive through Silicon Valley's sun-drenched landscape, André shared his own story of discrimination, how his engineering degree from Haiti wasn't recognized in America, forcing him to drive for rideshare companies while studying for recertification. "But I do not give up," he said cheerfully. "My daughter starts Stanford next year. First in our family to attend American University." His resilience reinforced Jasmine's determination. "Sometimes the best response to disrespect is success," she told him, leaving a generous tip as they arrived at the gleaming glass headquarters of Sequoia Ventures. Diana Frost, Sequoia's lead partner, welcomed Jasmine in the lobby. At 45, Diana had a reputation as one of the sharpest venture capitalists in tech, with an impressive portfolio of unicorn startups. "You look like you've been through war," Diana commented as they walked toward the conference room. "Commercial aviation," Jasmine replied dryly. Close enough. Despite her exhaustion, Jasmine delivered a masterful presentation to Sequoia's investment committee. Her proposal for a $2.8 billion investment in financial technology infrastructure was compelling. A vision for banking platforms that would democratize access to financial services for underserved communities while generating substantial returns. The future of banking isn't just digital, it's inclusive, Jasmine concluded. And inclusion is profitable. By presentation's end, Diana and her partners were convinced. They approved the full investment amount, with Diana personally committing to join the project's advisory board. "Let's celebrate over dinner," Diana suggested afterward. "I know a fantastic place in Palo Alto. Over Wagyu beef and expensive Cabernet at a small, exclusive restaurant." Jasmine finally shared her experience on national airlines. Diana listened intently, her expression darkening as the story unfolded. "That's outrageous," Diana said when Jasmine finished. "Typical national airlines, though. Their corporate culture is stuck in 1950. "You sound like you know them well," Jasmine observed. Diana twirled her wine glass thoughtfully. "More than I'd like to. They've been shopping for investors for months. Their CEO Walter Bryden has approached several firms, including mine. They're drowning in debt after their failed expansion to Asia." Jasmine set down her fork, a strategic realization dawning. "They're looking for investors." "Desperately," Diana confirmed. "Their balance sheet is a disaster. They need about $500 million to stay afloat through next quarter. Bryden's been practically begging Silicon Valley for a bailout." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Jasmine's mind was racing with possibilities. Back in her hotel suite that night, sleep eluded her despite her exhaustion. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching National Airlines' financial situation. Diana's assessment had been accurate. The airline's recent quarterly filings showed alarming debt levels, declining passenger numbers, and a series of failed strategic initiatives. Their stock had dropped 30% in the past year, and industry analysts were predicting potential bankruptcy without significant investment. Further digging revealed a company culture problem that extended far beyond Jasmine's individual experience. Former employees had posted scathing reviews online describing systematic discrimination, with minorities and women routinely passed over for promotions. Several discrimination lawsuits had been quietly settled out of court in recent years. At 2 a.m., Jasmine picked up her phone and called Andre Thompson, Pinnacle Capital's vice president of acquisitions. Despite the late hour, he answered on the second ring. "Andre, I need you to pull together everything we have on the commercial airline industry, particularly national airlines," she said without preamble. "And schedule an emergency strategy meeting for tomorrow afternoon when I'm back." "May I ask why we're suddenly interested in airlines?" Andre asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "Let's just say I had an illuminating customer experience," Jasmine replied. "I think there's an opportunity here, both for significant returns and for something more important." After hanging up, Jasmine stared out her hotel window at San Francisco's glittering skyline. The humiliation she'd experienced was transforming into something more powerful: purpose. National Airlines had made a crucial mistake. They'd mistreated someone with the resources and determination to hold them accountable on a scale they couldn't imagine. "This isn't just business," she whispered to herself. "This is justice." Jasmine's return flight to Atlanta was on Delta, a deliberate choice after her experience with National Airlines. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. The Delta flight attendants were professional and courteous, treating her first-class ticket as the ordinary business transaction it was, rather than cause for suspicion. As she sipped complimentary champagne before takeoff, Jasmine reflected on how differently her day was starting compared to 48 hours earlier. The respect she received shouldn't have felt like a luxury, but after yesterday's humiliation, each small courtesy felt like vindication. Back in Atlanta, Jasmine wasted no time. Her first call was to Terrence Williams, the law professor who had sat beside her in economy on the National Airlines flight. They arranged to meet at Pinnacle Capital's downtown headquarters that afternoon. Terence arrived looking every bit the distinguished academic in his tweed jacket with leather elbow patches, carrying a worn leather briefcase filled with legal references. "What happened to you wasn't just poor customer service," he explained, spreading documents across Jasmine's conference table. "It was textbook discrimination under Title II of the Civil Rights Act. The question is, what do you want to achieve here?" "I want accountability," Jasmine replied. "Not just for me, but systematic change. These incidents keep happening because companies calculate that settlements are cheaper than cultural transformation. Then we need evidence of a pattern, not just your isolated experience," Terence advised. By the end of their meeting, Jasmine had engaged Terence as a legal consultant and developed their next steps. That same day, she hired Sofia Rodriguez, a former FBI agent who now ran one of Atlanta's top private investigation firms. "I need comprehensive intelligence on national airlines," Jasmine told Sofia during their initial consultation. "Their culture, practices, complaints, internal communications, anything that shows a pattern of discrimination." Sofia, a sharp-eyed woman with 20 years of investigative experience, nodded confidently. "If there's a pattern, we'll find it. Companies this size can't keep secrets forever, too many employees, too much documentation." Over the next 3 weeks, Sofia's team conducted a thorough investigation. They interviewed former National Airlines employees, gathered public records, and used legal channels to access complaint histories. The evidence they assembled was damning. "It's worse than we thought," Sofia reported, delivering a 3-inch binder of findings. "We've documented 47 incidents in the past 18 months where passengers of color were removed or downgraded from premium cabins. Internal emails show supervisors directing staff to apply extra scrutiny to certain passengers. The investigation uncovered a troubling culture emanating from the top. CEO Walter Bryden had a history of inappropriate comments at industry events, and the executive team was overwhelmingly white and male, with diversity initiatives consistently underfunded or abandoned." Most damning were internal emails from Maxwell Peterson, the supervisor who had forced Jasmine to move seats. In correspondence with other managers, he had referred to first class as our premium customer environment and discussed strategies for maintaining passenger comfort through selective enforcement of policies. With mounting evidence in hand, Jasmine arranged a meeting with prominent civil rights attorney Benjamin Hayes. His downtown office walls were covered with framed newspaper headlines documenting his successful battles against corporate discrimination. "This is one of the most well-documented cases of corporate discrimination I've seen," Benjamin said after reviewing the evidence. "We could file a class action lawsuit that would cost them millions, possibly hundreds of millions when punitive damages are factored in." "What would that accomplish beyond financial punishment?" Jasmine asked. Benjamin leaned back in his chair. "Realistically, they'd settle, sign some agreements promising to do better, hire a diversity officer who'd be sidelined within months, and continue with business as usual once the media attention faded." Jasmine nodded. "Exactly. That's why I'm considering a different approach. The lawsuit will be our leverage, but not our endgame." Together with her legal and investigative team, Jasmine developed a comprehensive understanding of National Airlines' vulnerabilities. The company's financial troubles made them particularly susceptible to pressure. A potential discrimination lawsuit would not only cost them financially but would devastate their already struggling brand. Further research into the airline's corporate structure revealed that CEO Walter Bryden had a particularly problematic history. Before joining National Airlines, he had left 2 previous companies following allegations of fostering hostile work environments. These departures had been disguised as strategic leadership changes, with substantial severance packages buying silence. Social media provided additional evidence of customer experiences similar to Jasmine's. Sofia's team compiled dozens of tweets, Facebook posts, and forum discussions from passengers of color describing discriminatory treatment on National Airlines flights. These accounts ranged from subtle slights to outright humiliation, forming a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. During a strategic planning session with Pinnacle's leadership team, Jasmine presented her findings and outlined her vision. National Airlines has a rot at its core, she concluded. And traditional remedies, lawsuits, settlements, public apologies, won't cure it. We need to remove the infection entirely. Andre Thompson, who had been analyzing the financial aspects, spoke up. From a purely business perspective, their current valuation makes them an attractive acquisition target. Their routes and airport slots have significant value, even if their brand is tarnished. Jasmine smiled. Exactly. We're not just seeking justice, we're making a sound business decision. National Airlines doesn't just need new policies, it needs new ownership. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine felt a sense of purpose stronger than any she'd experienced in her career. This wasn't just about righting a personal wrong. It was about creating lasting change in an industry where discrimination had been normalized for too long. Prepare the acquisition strategy, she instructed her team. But keep our intentions quiet for now. We'll move when they least expect it. Pinnacle Capital began quietly acquiring shares of National Airlines through various subsidiaries and investment vehicles. To avoid triggering regulatory disclosure requirements, they kept each purchase below the reporting threshold, gradually building a significant position without alerting the airline's management. Jasmine's financial team worked around the clock analyzing the airline's weaknesses and acquisition potential. They identified key shareholders who might be willing to sell, vulnerable debt positions that could be leveraged, and potential synergies that would make the acquisition financially sound beyond the personal satisfaction it would bring. Their debt is their biggest weakness, reported Aisha Johnson, Pinnacle's chief financial analyst. They've got $420 million in bonds coming due in 6 months, and their credit rating is one step above junk status. They're going to struggle to refinance under current conditions. With a solid financial strategy in place, Jasmine scheduled a special meeting with Pinnacle's board to approve the major acquisition. The boardroom, with its panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline, filled with the firm's 12 directors, accomplished business leaders who had guided Pinnacle through years of successful growth. This is a departure from our typical investment strategy, Jasmine acknowledged, standing at the head of the polished mahogany table. But the opportunity is exceptional from both a financial and strategic perspective. Not everyone was immediately convinced. Harold Jenkins, the board's most conservative member, raised significant concerns. Airlines are notoriously volatile investments, he argued. Warren Buffett himself once said that the best way to become a millionaire is to start as a billionaire and buy an airline. What makes this different? Jasmine had anticipated this objection. Her presentation methodically addressed every potential concern, the financial risks, the regulatory hurdles, the management challenges of entering a new industry. But she also spoke about something rarely discussed in Pinnacle's boardroom: social responsibility. Beyond the numbers, this acquisition represents an opportunity to transform a company with a documented history of discrimination into an industry leader in inclusion and equity, she explained. The brand value of such a transformation would be substantial. Her powerful presentation gradually won over even the most skeptical board members. By meeting's end, she had secured approval for an acquisition budget of up to $1.2 billion. More than enough to gain controlling interest in National Airlines under current market conditions. With the board's approval secured, Jasmine initiated the next phase of her plan, increasing public pressure on the airline. She discreetly reached out to her media connections, including Zoe Franklin, an investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal known for her hard-hitting coverage of corporate malfeasance. "I have information about systematic discrimination at a major U.S. airline," Jasmine told Zoe during a confidential lunch meeting. "Including documentation and testimony from former employees." Zoe's subsequent investigation resulted in a front-page exposé titled, "The Uncomfortable Truth: Discrimination Claims Plague National Airlines." The article detailed numerous incidents similar to Jasmine's experience, revealing a pattern that couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents. The story spread rapidly across business and social media channels. National Airlines stock price, already weak, dropped 15% in a single trading session as investors worried about potential lawsuits and damage to the brand. At National Airlines headquarters in Dallas, the executive team held an emergency meeting to address the crisis. CEO Walter Brighton dismissed the allegations as overblown complaints from overly sensitive passengers, while the company's PR team scrambled to draft a statement emphasizing their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Their response proved inadequate as more former employees came forward with stories of internal discrimination, and social media amplified passenger accounts of biased treatment. The airline's crisis deepened when 3 major corporate clients suspended their business travel contracts pending review of the allegations. Do you think Jasmine was right to use her influence to expose National Airlines discrimination rather than just filing a lawsuit? Comment number 1 if you believe corporate accountability requires this kind of public pressure, or number 2 if you think she should have handled it more privately. This story shows how power dynamics can shift dramatically when someone underestimates the wrong person, doesn't it? Hit that like button if you're eager to see how Jasmine's strategy unfolds, and subscribe for more stories of justice and transformation. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position with the resources she has? Let's continue this journey together and find out how far she'll go to change an entire company culture. Desperate to contain the damage, National Airlines' legal team reached out to Jasmine with a settlement offer, $2 million and a public apology in exchange for her silence on the incident. The offer came with a confidentiality agreement that would prevent her from discussing her experience or the airline's discriminatory practices. Jasmine strategically declined the settlement while continuing her acquisition plan. "I'm not interested in hush money," she informed their attorneys. "I'm interested in real change." Behind the scenes, Pinnacle's team continued accumulating National Airlines stock, which had become increasingly affordable as negative publicity drove down the share price. Financial analysts began speculating about the company's vulnerability to takeover, with several publications naming potential acquirers, though none mentioned Pinnacle Capital. To accelerate the pressure, Jasmine authorized leaking select information to financial analysts about the airline's vulnerabilities. An anonymous industry source provided data on National's declining bookings and cash flow problems to key investment newsletters, fueling speculation about the company's viability as an independent entity. Wall Street began openly discussing potential takeover scenarios. National Airlines appears ripe for acquisition, declared a CNBC analyst during a segment on undervalued transportation stocks. The question isn't if they'll be acquired, but when, and by whom. As National Airlines' position weakened, Jasmine's resolve strengthened. The company that had humiliated her was now fighting for its survival, unaware that she was positioning herself to determine its fate. 2 months after her humiliating experience, Jasmine attended National Airlines' annual shareholder meeting in Dallas. Pinnacle Capital now controlled nearly 18% of the company's stock, enough to guarantee her admission but not enough to reveal their takeover intentions. She arrived dressed in an understated gray suit, her hair pulled back in a simple chignon, intentionally downplaying her executive status. With oversized glasses and minimal makeup, she looked more like an academic than the CEO of a major investment firm. This strategic anonymity allowed her to observe without drawing attention. The meeting was held in a ballroom at the Four Seasons Hotel, where approximately 200 shareholders gathered to hear CEO Walter Brighton and his executive team discuss the company's performance and outlook. The atmosphere was tense. Shareholders were concerned about the recent negative publicity and declining stock price. From her seat in the middle of the room, Jasmine watched the executive team's dismissive attitude toward diversity concerns raised by several smaller shareholders. When questioned about the discrimination allegations, Walter Brighton offered platitudes about isolated incidents and comprehensive training programs, without acknowledging any systemic issues. "We take customer service very seriously," Brighton insisted from the podium, his voice smooth with practiced corporate sincerity. "Our goal is to make every passenger comfortable." During the question and answer session, Jasmine cued at the microphone. When her turn came, she asked in a calm, measured voice, "What specific metrics does National Airlines use to measure diversity and inclusion in its customer service practices, and how are those metrics tied to executive compensation?" Brighton seemed momentarily thrown by the specificity of her question before recovering with a vague answer about ongoing assessment and commitment to improvement. His evasiveness was telling. As the meeting continued, Jasmine noticed flight attendant Brenda Stevens serving coffee at the refreshment table, part of the cabin crew selected to provide hospitality at the corporate event. Brenda didn't recognize Jasmine in her understated attire, giving her a perfunctory smile while handing her a coffee cup. "Thank you, Brenda," Jasmine said, reading her name tag. "We've actually met before. On Flight 237 from Atlanta to San Francisco, about 2 months ago. You asked to see my first-class ticket twice before having me removed to economy." Brenda's smile froze as recognition dawned in her eyes. I was following procedure," she stammered. "Whose procedure?" Jasmine asked. "Because I'm curious if removing black passengers from first class when white passengers complain is written in your employee handbook, or if it's just understood." Before Brenda could respond, pilot Kevin Barrett approached the refreshment table. He too had been selected to represent the airline at the shareholder event, his captain's uniform a symbol of authority and professionalism. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, not recognizing Jasmine. "Captain Barrett," Jasmine said with a smile. "We've also met. You emerged from your cockpit to support my removal from first class without even looking at my ticket. I'm wondering if that's standard procedure for all passengers, or just ones who look like me." Kevin's face flushed red as he realized who she was. "That situation was handled according to our protocols for passenger comfort." "Passenger comfort," Jasmine interrupted, her voice still calm but carrying enough to attract attention from nearby shareholders. An interesting euphemism for racial discrimination. The commotion drew Supervisor Maxwell Peterson, who had been chatting with executives near the stage. As he approached, Jasmine turned to face him directly. "Mr. Peterson," she said. "The last time we spoke, you told me I could either move to economy or take another flight. Today I have a different proposition for you." By now, a small crowd had gathered, including several financial reporters covering the shareholder meeting. Maxwell's eyes darted nervously between Jasmine and the onlookers. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he suggested quietly. "I disagree," Jasmine replied. "Discrimination thrives in privacy. Accountability requires witnesses." With deliberate movements, Jasmine removed her glasses and straightened to her full height, abandoning the understated persona she'd adopted for the morning. "My name is Jasmine Washington. I'm the CEO of Pinnacle Capital, which now owns 18% of National Airlines' outstanding shares." The revelation sent immediate murmurs through the crowd. Maxwell's face paled as he realized the magnitude of their mistake. "Ms. Washington, if there was any misunderstanding on your flight," he began. "There was no misunderstanding," Jasmine interrupted. "There was discrimination, documented and witnessed. And it wasn't an isolated incident." She opened her portfolio and produced copies of the evidence Sofia Rodriguez had gathered, internal emails, complaint records, testimony from former employees. As she distributed them to nearby shareholders and reporters, the murmurs grew louder. National Airlines has a documented pattern of discrimination that starts at the top and permeates throughout the organization, Jasmine announced, her voice now carrying across the ballroom. Several shareholders began taking photos and videos with their phones as the confrontation unfolded. CEO Walter Brighton rushed over, his corporate composure cracking. "Ms. Washington, this is highly inappropriate." "What's inappropriate," Jasmine countered, "is creating a corporate culture where employees feel empowered to humiliate passengers based on race. What's inappropriate is claiming to value diversity while maintaining an executive team and board that's 93% white and 87% male." The confrontation was being live-streamed by several financial news outlets that had been covering the shareholder meeting. Within minutes, clips were spreading across social media platforms, with commentators praising Jasmine's composed but devastating takedown of the airline's leadership. National Airlines stock price began dropping in real time as traders reacted to the unfolding PR disaster. By meeting's end, the share price had fallen another 12%, pushing the company's market capitalization to its lowest point in 5 years. That evening, emergency board meetings were held at both National Airlines and Pinnacle Capital. At National, directors frantically discussed damage control strategies and whether Walter Brighton should resign to appease shareholders and the public. At Pinnacle, Jasmine and her team refined their acquisition strategy, preparing to capitalize on the airline's weakened position. The media frenzy continued for days. Business publications ran headlines like, "Flight Risk, CEO Confronts Airline That Discriminated Against Her," and "Power Shift at 30,000 Feet, How National Airlines Picked the Wrong Passenger to Downgrade." Desperate calls from National Airlines executives to Jasmine's office went unanswered. Walter Brighton issued a public apology that rang hollow, acknowledging the unfortunate incident, while insisting it didn't reflect the company's values. Privately, Brighton was furious, berating his team for not identifying Jasmine as a VIP passenger before the incident. His focus on status rather than equal treatment for all passengers further confirmed the cultural problems at the airline's core. As the crisis deepened, Jasmine maintained a calculated silence, refusing interview requests and declining to comment further. Her public confrontation had accomplished its purpose. National Airlines was vulnerable, its reputation damaged beyond quick repair, its stock price at historic lows. The stage was set for the next phase of her plan, complete acquisition. Over the next month, Pinnacle Capital continued its strategic acquisition of National Airlines shares, crossing the critical 25% ownership threshold. This level of ownership gave them significant influence over company decisions and triggered regulatory filings that publicly revealed Pinnacle as a major stakeholder. The business world reacted with surprise and interest. Financial news channels featured segments analyzing Jasmine Washington's unusual move into the airline industry, with commentators debating whether this was a pure business decision or something more personal. "This isn't Pinnacle's typical investment profile," noted a Bloomberg analyst. "Washington is known for tech and financial services plays, not struggling legacy carriers. There's something more to this story." National Airlines management, now fully aware of Pinnacle's intentions, mobilized to fight the takeover. CEO Walter Brighton hired Gregory Harrison, a prominent corporate defense attorney known for helping companies fend off hostile acquisitions. Their legal team filed challenges with regulatory agencies, claiming the takeover would reduce competition and harm consumers. "This is a transparent attempt to manipulate our stock price and seize control of a vital transportation asset," Brighton declared in a press conference. "We will fight this predatory action with every resource available." The legal battle intensified when depositions began for both the discrimination case and the regulatory review. Flight attendant Brenda Stevens struggled under questioning, her testimony revealing inconsistencies in how she applied company policies to different passengers. "So you've requested additional verification from other first-class passengers who presented valid boarding passes?" Benjamin Hayes asked during her deposition. "Well, in certain situations," Brenda responded hesitantly. "And how do you determine which situations warrant additional verification?" Her uncomfortable silence spoke volumes. Pilot Kevin Barrett's deposition proved equally damaging. When presented with the airline's own records showing he had never left the cockpit to verify other passengers' tickets, he could not explain his decision to intervene in Jasmine's case. "I was informed there was a situation requiring attention," he claimed. "By whom, and what exactly were you told?" Benjamin pressed. "I don't recall the specific details," Kevin replied, his credibility diminishing with each evasive answer. Supervisor Maxwell Peterson's deposition revealed the most troubling aspects of National's culture. When questioned about his email referring to maintaining passenger comfort through selective enforcement, he attempted to defend the practice. "First-class passengers have certain expectations," he stated. "And those expectations include not sitting next to black executives?" Benjamin asked directly. The resulting silence was damning. Testimony from other passengers who had witnessed Jasmine's removal further strengthened her position. Several described their discomfort at seeing her treated differently from other business travelers, with one specifically noting that Raymond Phillips had been served his pre-flight drink while loudly complaining about Jasmine's presence. As the legal proceedings continued, the case came before Judge Amara Johnson, a respected federal jurist with a reputation for fairness and thorough legal analysis. After reviewing the evidence and arguments from both sides, she ruled decisively in Pinnacle's favor, dismissing National Airlines' attempts to block the acquisition as, without legal merit and apparently designed merely to delay legitimate business proceedings. The judge's ruling energized financial institutions backing Jasmine's vision. Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan committed to financing packages that would support a complete takeover, impressed by the detailed transformation plan Pinnacle had developed for the airline. Wall Street analysts, initially skeptical, began predicting Pinnacle's eventual success. "Washington has outmaneuvered Brighton at every turn," wrote a Barron's analyst. "The question now isn't whether she'll gain control, but what she'll do with the airline once she has it." Within National Airlines' board of directors, divisions emerged as the takeover began to seem inevitable. Several directors, concerned about their own reputations and financial interests, privately reached out to Jasmine to discuss terms for supporting Pinnacle's bid. "Walter's leadership has become a liability," admitted board member Stephanie Turner during a confidential dinner meeting with Jasmine. "The discrimination issues go deeper than we realized, and his response has been inadequate." As internal support crumbled, Walter Brighton grew increasingly desperate. He approached several potential white knight investors, seeking competing bids that could derail Pinnacle's takeover. But the airline's problems, financial struggles, discrimination lawsuits, and damaged brand reputation, made it an unattractive investment without a comprehensive transformation plan. Brighton's final attempt to save his position came through a potential partnership with Asia Pacific Airlines, a major international carrier seeking expansion into U.S. markets. Jasmine countered by forming a strategic alliance with Singapore International Holdings, a respected investment group with extensive aviation experience, strengthening Pinnacle's position with both additional capital and industry expertise. Jasmine maintained a strategic media presence throughout this period, giving carefully selected interviews that focused on her vision for transforming the airline rather than the discrimination she had experienced. "This acquisition isn't about the past, it's about the future," she told the Financial Times. "We see tremendous potential to create an airline that excels in both business performance and corporate citizenship." Her measured, forward-looking approach won public support and contrasted sharply with Brighton's increasingly defensive posture. National Airlines customers began voting with their wallets, with bookings declining as travelers opted for carriers without discrimination controversies. The power shift accelerated when Pinnacle filed a formal notice with the SEC announcing their intention to replace National's board at the next shareholder meeting. With their growing ownership stake and the support of other institutional investors, they had the votes to succeed. As the decisive shareholder meeting approached, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. What had begun as a humiliating experience had evolved into something far more significant, an opportunity to transform not just one company but to send a message to corporate America about the real costs of discrimination. "Sometimes power isn't about who has the most authority in the moment," she told her team during their final strategy session. "It's about who has the resilience to turn setbacks into opportunities for real change." The headquarters of National Airlines occupied a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Dallas, its corporate logo prominently displayed against the Texas sky. On the morning of Pinnacle Capital's formal takeover bid, Jasmine Washington arrived for what promised to be the most consequential board meeting in the airline's history. The executive boardroom on the 42nd floor offered panoramic views of the city, its massive mahogany table surrounded by 30 leather chairs. By 9 a.m., every seat was filled with board members, executives, legal teams, and major shareholders. The tension in the room was palpable as Jasmine took her position at the presenter's podium. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm and authoritative. "Today, Pinnacle Capital is formally offering to acquire all outstanding shares of National Airlines at $42 per share, a 30% premium over yesterday's closing price." The announcement sent murmurs through the room despite the fact that most had anticipated this move. Seeing the actual numbers, representing a total bid of approximately $3.8 billion, made the reality of the situation impossible to ignore. CEO Walter Brighton immediately rose to oppose the offer. "This hostile takeover attempt is not in the best interest of our shareholders, employees, or customers," he declared, his face flushed with anger. "National Airlines has served this country for 67 years as an independent carrier, and we intend to continue that legacy." What followed was a dramatic presentation of competing visions. Jasmine unveiled Pinnacle's comprehensive transformation plan for the airline: rebranding, fleet modernization, route optimization, and most importantly, a complete cultural overhaul focused on inclusion and exceptional customer experience for all passengers. "Our research shows that truly inclusive companies outperform their peers by 36%, Jasmine explained, presenting data that directly linked diversity metrics to profitability. "This isn't just about doing the right thing, though that would be reason enough. It's about building a stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more profitable airline." Her presentation included specific initiatives: revised hiring and promotion policies, comprehensive anti-bias training, diversity targets tied to executive compensation, and a customer service approach designed to ensure consistent treatment regardless of race, gender, or background. The airline executives received Jasmine's vision with hostility. Walter Brighton dismissed her plan as costly social engineering that ignores aviation fundamentals, while Chief Operating Officer Frank Thompson characterized it as impractical idealism from someone who doesn't understand this industry. Their resistance only highlighted the cultural problems Jasmine was addressing. When she presented documented instances of discrimination beyond her own experience, several executives visibly bristled, revealing their discomfort with having these issues discussed openly. The shareholder vote that would determine the company's fate was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the interim, both sides launched intensive lobbying campaigns targeting major institutional investors whose votes would be decisive. Jasmine's team worked around the clock, meeting with investment funds, pension managers, and financial analysts to make their case. They emphasized both the business logic of the acquisition and the ethical imperatives of addressing the airline's discrimination issues. Walter Brighton orchestrated a smear campaign against Jasmine, with anonymous sources questioning her aviation industry expertise and suggesting that her motivations were purely personal. "This is revenge, not business," claimed one industry newsletter citing insiders familiar with the situation. Jasmine refused to engage with these attacks, maintaining a fact-based approach focused on the airline's potential under new leadership. "I don't need to be a pilot to know that discrimination is bad business," she told the Wall Street Journal when asked about Brighton's criticisms. "And I don't need airline experience to recognize a company culture in need of transformation." As the vote approached, emotional testimony from minority employees about National Airlines' culture strengthened Jasmine's position. Samuel Jackson, a former HR director who had resigned in protest over discriminatory promotion practices, came forward with documentation showing qualified minority candidates had been repeatedly passed over for advancement. "There was an unwritten understanding about who could rise to certain positions," Samuel explained during a press conference arranged by Jasmine's team. "I was told directly by a senior vice president that passengers expect a certain look from pilots and executives, which was clearly code for white and male." His testimony prompted federal transportation authorities to launch an investigation into the airline's employment practices, creating additional pressure on current leadership and swaying undecided shareholders towards supporting Pinnacle's bid. A further blow to Walter Brighton came when financial auditors discovered irregularities in how executive bonuses had been calculated and awarded over the previous 3 years. While not technically illegal, the findings suggested ethical concerns about leadership's self-dealing at shareholders' expense. "These financial improprieties may not rise to the level of criminal charges," noted corporate governance expert Thomas Chen in a widely circulated analysis, "but they certainly call into question whether current management is prioritizing shareholder value or personal enrichment." As the shareholder meeting day approached, industry observers predicted a decisive victory for Pinnacle Capital. National Airlines made several desperate last-minute attempts to find alternative buyers or restructure to avoid the takeover, but each effort failed as potential partners balked at the company's combination of financial, legal, and reputational challenges. The night before the decisive vote, Jasmine reviewed her presentation one final time in her hotel suite. The journey from humiliated passenger to potential airline owner had been extraordinary, but she remained focused on the transformation ahead rather than personal vindication. "Tomorrow isn't about winning," she told Andre Thompson during their final strategy call. "It's about beginning the real work of creating an airline where what happened to me can't happen to anyone else." The morning of the decisive shareholder meeting dawned clear and bright in Dallas. News vans lined the street outside National Airlines headquarters, with reporters doing live stand-ups for financial networks covering what had become one of the most dramatic corporate takeovers in recent memory. Jasmine arrived in a custom Carolina Herrera suit, navy blue with subtle gold accents, projecting confident authority as she navigated through the media gauntlet. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, and her minimal jewelry included only diamond stud earrings and her grandmother's gold bangle bracelet, a reminder of the woman who had taught her to transform obstacles into opportunities. "Ms. Washington. Is this personal or business?" shouted one reporter as she passed. "In my experience, the best business decisions recognize that companies are made of people," she replied without breaking stride. "Today is about creating a better future for everyone connected to National Airlines, passengers, employees, and shareholders." The lobby of the building buzzed with tension as shareholders, analysts, and media representatives checked in for the meeting. Jasmine noticed several airline employees watching her with mixed expressions: curiosity, resentment, and in some cases, hope. Flight attendant Kyle Thompson, who had shown her kindness during her humiliating flight, approached hesitantly. "Ms. Washington," he said quietly. "I just wanted to say, many of us are hoping you succeed today. The culture here needs to change." "Thank you, Kyle," she replied warmly. "If things go as planned, people like you will be the future of this airline." As Kyle walked away, Jasmine encountered Raymond Phillips, the first-class passenger whose complaint had triggered her removal from her seat. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by visible discomfort. "Ms. Washington," he began awkwardly. "I want to apologize for what happened on that flight. I never intended." "Mr. Phillips," Jasmine interrupted calmly, "your apology would mean more if it had come before you learned who I was and what I could do. Today isn't about personal amends, it's about systemic change." With that, she continued toward the elevators, leaving Raymond standing in uncomfortable silence. The grand ballroom where the vote would take place was filled to capacity with over 500 shareholders representing more than 90% of the company's outstanding stock. The stage featured two podiums, one for current management and one for Pinnacle Capital's team. Walter Brighton opened the meeting with a passionate defense of his leadership and vision for National Airlines' independent future. His voice occasionally cracked with emotion as he described the company's legacy and tradition, urging shareholders to reject what he called an opportunistic takeover that exploits temporary challenges. When Jasmine's turn came, she approached the podium with measured confidence. Rather than immediately launching into her presentation, she paused, surveying the room and making eye contact with key decision-makers. "Transformation," she began, "is rarely comfortable. But in business, as in life, discomfort often precedes growth. National Airlines stands at such a moment today." Her presentation methodically addressed both the business case for acquisition and the moral imperative for cultural change. She detailed specific diversity and inclusion initiatives that would be implemented, including a complete overhaul of training protocols, transparent promotion pathways, and accountability metrics tied to customer experience. "An airline that truly welcomes every passenger doesn't just fulfill a moral obligation," she explained. "It expands its customer base and builds loyalty that translates directly to profitability." Jasmine's financial projections showed how these changes, combined with operational improvements and strategic route adjustments, would increase the airline's valuation by an estimated 60% within 5 years. "The choice today isn't between tradition and change," she concluded. "It's between clinging to a flawed past or embracing a more profitable, more equitable future." Throughout Jasmine's presentation, Walter Brighton sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to his executive team. The tension in the room was palpable as shareholders began the voting process, with electronic ballots tallying results in real time on large screens at the front of the ballroom. Financial news networks displayed stock tickers showing National Airlines' share price fluctuating with each rumor and update. Trading volume reached record levels as investors positioned themselves based on anticipated outcomes. After an hour of voting, the room fell silent as the final tallies appeared on screen. Pinnacle Capital's acquisition bid had secured 63.7% approval, a decisive victory that would give Jasmine's team complete control of the airline. Walter Brighton's face drained of color as he stared at the results. Without offering congratulations or acknowledgement, he stormed from the podium and exited the ballroom, followed by several loyal executives. Jasmine maintained her professional composure as she approached the microphone for closing remarks. "Today marks a new beginning for National Airlines," she stated. "We look forward to working with the dedicated employees who keep this company flying, and to creating an airline that truly serves all passengers with dignity and respect." As the meeting concluded, Jasmine's transition team immediately moved to secure operational continuity. Key personnel changes were announced within hours, with interim leadership appointed to maintain stability while permanent executives were selected through a comprehensive search process. By sunset, the Pinnacle Capital flag flew alongside National's logo at company headquarters, a visual symbol of the power shift that had occurred. For Jasmine, however, the most meaningful moment came when she received a text message from her grandmother back in Georgia. "They put you in economy, so you bought the whole plane. That's my girl." 6 months after the shareholder vote, the airline formerly known as National had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis. Rebranded as Skyline Airways, with a sleek new logo symbolizing limitless horizons, the company had emerged from its troubled past with renewed purpose and direction. Jasmine Washington, now executive chairperson, had assembled a diverse management team that reflected the passengers they served. The executive suite, once an exclusive enclave of white men, now included talented leaders of various backgrounds, genders, and perspectives, each selected for both their professional expertise and their commitment to inclusive excellence. "Culture isn't changed through memos and mission statements," Jasmine often reminded her team. "It's changed through consistent actions and accountability at every level." Those actions included innovative customer service protocols specifically designed to eliminate bias in passenger interactions. Flight attendants underwent comprehensive training focused on consistent treatment and cultural sensitivity. Supervisors were evaluated not just on operational metrics but on equity measures that tracked treatment of both employees and passengers. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some employees resisted the changes, clinging to outdated attitudes and practices. Others left voluntarily, uncomfortable with the new expectations. But most embraced the opportunity to be part of something groundbreaking in the industry. Former problem employees faced various consequences based on their specific actions and willingness to change. Maxwell Peterson, the supervisor who had forced Jasmine's seat change, was reassigned to baggage handling, a position that required him to experience the physical demands of airline operations while limiting his authority over passenger experiences. Flight attendant Brenda Stevens remained with the company but underwent extensive retraining and a 6-month probationary period during which her interactions with passengers were closely monitored. To her credit, she eventually became an advocate for the new approach, acknowledging that her previous behavior had been influenced by unconscious biases she was now working to overcome. Raymond Phillips, the passenger whose complaint had triggered Jasmine's removal, received a formal letter informing him that his status in the airline's loyalty program had been revoked and that he would no longer be eligible for premium services. The message was clear: discriminatory behavior would not be rewarded. Pilot Kevin Barrett faced perhaps the most significant adjustment. The new chief pilot at Skyline Airways was Dr. Maya Johnson, a former Air Force colonel with 20 years of flying experience who happened to be the first black female to lead flight operations at a major U.S. carrier. Kevin now reported directly to Maya, who held him to exacting standards of professionalism and inclusivity. Not all transitions were punitive. Kyle Thompson, the young flight attendant who had shown Jasmine kindness during her humiliating experience, was promoted to Director of Customer Experience, where his natural empathy and commitment to equal treatment made him invaluable in developing new service standards. Terrence Williams, the law professor who had witnessed Jasmine's discrimination, accepted an invitation to join Skyline's board of directors, where his legal expertise and perspective on civil rights issues helped guide corporate governance. The airline industry took notice as Skyline implemented a dramatic increase in minority hiring and promotion. Within a year, the company's workforce diversity metrics had improved by over 40%, with similar gains in management representation. More importantly, employee satisfaction scores rose across all demographic groups, indicating that the cultural changes were benefiting everyone. Skyline Airways quickly became an industry leader in diversity practices, with other airlines beginning to adopt similar approaches as they recognized both the moral imperative and business advantages. Industry publications that had initially questioned Jasmine's social engineering now featured Skyline as a case study in successful corporate transformation. 13 months after the takeover, Jasmine boarded the inaugural flight of the fully rebranded Skyline Airways. The Atlanta to San Francisco route, the same one where she had experienced discrimination, had been selected intentionally for the symbolic launch of the new era. As she settled into her first-class seat, Jasmine experienced a profound full-circle moment. The flight crew welcomed her aboard with the same professional courtesy extended to every passenger, not with the exaggerated deference often shown to VIPs nor with the suspicion she had faced previously. Captain Maya Johnson's voice came over the intercom, "Welcome aboard Skyline Airways Flight 1, where every passenger flies with dignity, respect, and the best service in the industry." During the flight, Jasmine reflected on the parallel journeys of personal and corporate transformation. The humiliation she had experienced had catalyzed not just a business acquisition but a reimagining of what air travel could be when built on principles of equity and inclusion. The financial results had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Skyline's customer satisfaction scores led the industry, bookings had increased 15% year-over-year, and the stock price had risen 42% since the rebranding. Vindicating Jasmine's insistence that ethical business was also profitable business. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine opened her laptop to review the final draft of her upcoming memoir, Higher Ground, Transforming Discrimination into Opportunity. Major publishers had engaged in a bidding war for the rights, recognizing that her story resonated far beyond the business world. The memoir would share not just the dramatic takeover but the deeper lessons about power, justice, and corporate responsibility that had emerged from the experience. Advance praise from business leaders, civil rights advocates, and cultural commentators suggested it would spark important conversations about the future of American business. Beyond Skyline Airways, Jasmine's actions had inspired industry-wide examination of how discrimination persisted in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Transportation regulators had launched initiatives to gather and publish diversity and inclusion metrics across airlines, creating transparency and accountability where little had existed before. Several major carriers had proactively revised their training and service protocols, recognizing that continued discrimination posed not just ethical concerns but serious business risks in an era where corporate behavior was increasingly scrutinized and shared on social media. As Jasmine sipped champagne and watched the sunrise at 30,000 feet, she thought about how far she, and the company, had come. The seat she occupied represented not just personal vindication but a fundamental shift in what was possible when determination met opportunity. The final chapter of her memoir ended with a reflection she had written during this very flight. Power isn't always about who has authority in a given moment. Sometimes, it's about who has the resilience to transform obstacles into opportunities. When they moved me to economy, they thought they were putting me in my place. They didn't realize they were showing me exactly where change needed to begin. Jasmine's journey teaches us that true power lies not in titles or positions, but in how we respond to injustice. When faced with discrimination, she chose strategic action over helpless acceptance. Instead of seeking personal compensation, she leveraged her resources to create systemic change that would benefit countless others facing similar treatment. This story reminds us that discrimination often persists because organizations calculate that settlements are cheaper than transformation. By acquiring the airline, Jasmine changed this equation, making inclusion a business imperative rather than a liability to manage. We also see that meaningful change requires more than policy updates, it demands accountability at every level. From the boardroom to the cabin crew, Jasmine created a culture where respect wasn't optional but fundamental to the company's identity and success. Perhaps most importantly, the story demonstrates that equity and profitability aren't opposing forces. By building an airline that genuinely welcomed every passenger, Skyline Airways achieved financial success that validated Jasmine's vision of ethical business as good business. The ultimate lesson? Sometimes when others try to put you in your place, they're showing you exactly where change needs to begin. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced that needs addressing? Would you have handled Jasmine's situation differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story of transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of overcoming injustice. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up against discrimination. Thank you for joining us on this journey of justice, and remember, your response to discrimination today could change systems tomorrow.